Ukraine says it's received the first of the US-made Patriot air defense systems it's been promised. The defense minister called the arrival of the powerful surface-to-air system an historic step that would allow the military to push Russian aircraft away from Ukraine's borders. The weaponry is widely regarded as one of the most advanced US air defense systems and is seen as critical in repelling Russian missile attacks. Meanwhile, South Korea's President Yoon Suk-yeol has said his government may offer more than just humanitarian and economic aid to Ukraine in case of a large-scale civilian attack. It's the first time Seoul has suggested it might shift its policy of not sending lethal military aid. The US has been nudging its Asian ally to provide more support to Ukraine. Well, for more on the war in Ukraine, let's bring in Arise Chief Correspondent John Cookson, who's monitoring developments for us from London. Good to see you, John. So the Patriot missile defense system, which has been at the top of Ukraine's wish list, if you like, has arrived in the country. Tell us more.
Hey, Charles, good to see you. Well, if I was in Kiev in the Zelensky regime, I wouldn't be jumping up and down too much in glee. And the reason I'm saying that is that as far as I can tell, they've had one of these Patriot systems delivered. Now, one to defend a country of tens of thousands of square kilometers is, you know, it doesn't even begin to tackle the problem because we know that the Russians can bomb from the air at will. Odessa was targeted last night with a swarm of missiles, and we're waiting to hear if there are any casualties there. But look, it's a start, isn't it? It looks like this system has come from Germany with some spare parts from the Netherlands. Charles, it takes about 90 personnel to operate one of these, just one of these systems, to maintain it and to fire it and to store it. The Ukrainians have trained 65 people in Oklahoma in the last few months to use one of these systems. So, as I say, before we start jumping up and down with excitement over this delivery of a Patriot missile system, let's just get it into context here. It's probably only one battery with 6 rockets in it, and they cost about $1 billion normally, 400 million for the system itself and 600 million for the rockets. So this is the background to all of this, and although it's very symbolic that Patriots have arrived in Ukraine, let's just, sort of put it all into context.
Well, thank you for putting it in context, John, because, I mean, we've read a lot about the Ukrainians literally jumping up and down. But to be clear, you agree with those who say that this is not likely to make Ukraine more secure because, first of all, the system's effectiveness is limited, and secondly, that it might not, in fact, there might not be enough of them to change the shape of the war.
We're absolutely clear on this. It's not a game changer in this war of attrition that the Russians are now fighting. It just isn't. It'll help, of course. It will protect one city or one front line, a front line that's, 900 kilometers long. And it will surely, if fired, if these 6 rockets are fired, they will stop incoming attacks from Russia. But it's minimal, and the Ukrainians, if we're to believe that the leaks from the Pentagon recently are true, they're due to run out of air defense missiles towards the end of next month. So, although it's exciting on one level that these Patriots have been delivered, or at least one has, maybe there's another one on the way from the US, it's just not enough to defeat the Russians in their air campaign. Now, Charles, there is a meeting of 50 nations, defense ministers from 50 nations, and their regular meeting at Ramstein in Germany on Friday. And I'm sure the Ukrainians will be urging all Western nations to please help us, because, you know, we have this so-called spring offensive happening, and we, frankly, as far as I can see, they're just not ready for it, Charles. And, you know, it's such a depressing story that the West just has not lived up to the promises so far. For example, this Patriot missile system, and they just need more of everything. As I discussed last night with you, to retake the land that the Russians have seized illegally, including Crimea, it will take something like a D-Day landing force to do that. And the Ukrainians are nowhere near that.
Well, it's important that you put it in perspective, and you have done so. So we appreciate that, John. But let's you talked about support for Ukraine, or potential for it. South Korea's president saying his government may offer more than just humanitarian and economic aid to Ukraine in the event of a large-scale civilian attack. It's the first time South Korea has suggested it might shift its policy of not sending military aid, and South Korea, of course, a major artillery producer.
Indeed it is, but so sad to say, this is another hyped up story, because the key word from the president of South Korea was we might or we may do this. Now, even if they do, and South Korea has quite a substantial arms industry, they can supply tanks, howitzers, attack helicopters, ammunition, rockets. But the Ukrainians don't know how to use this stuff. They have to be trained. It will take months of training to get them used to firing anything that comes out of South Korea. The backstory, I think, to this South Korea tale is that, look, the Far East militarily is going to get pretty hot soon if reports are true that China is going to invade Taiwan, and South Korea is right in the middle of this. So it does no harm at all for South Korea to cozy up to NATO and the Americans and say, yes, well, we might supply Ukraine with military hardware. You know, this intent is there, and it puts them in the good books with NATO, whose protection they may actually need in the months and years to come if China does indeed invade Taiwan and takes other military adventures in the Indo-Pacific region. So look behind the headlines, Charles. It all sounds very fine. South Korea has the military hardware. The Ukrainians don't know how to use it. And the key word from the president was that we might supply. He didn't say that they would.
John, thanks very much indeed for that clarification. John Cookson, Arise chief correspondent, talking to me there from London.